Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the critical delay mod. Again, this is part 2 in a series of now 4, as you may have seen in the community post, as there are a couple of unexpected complications and in-depth analyses that pushed the video out longer than I was expecting. A couple of you have been asking about the snipers and my thoughts on them for critical delays use in Eidolons. Well, here's my take on it today. First, we're going to look at the Vectis Prime. Now, the Vectis Prime is a very strong sniper that's part of the typical meta. It has a very strong reload and a 2 magazine size. Critical delay increases that crit chance significantly from 75 up to 86.1. However, I would not normally recommend using critical delay on a Vectis sniper unless you have a minus magazine ribbon as shown here. The minus fire rate does hurt it quite a decent amount. You could compensate by having arcane acceleration as well as having a wisp haste mode on the team, otherwise I probably wouldn't recommend doing this. As you can see, the fire rate already dropped down to 1.71. Prime Chamber is basically standard on all Vectis builds, so at least you'd be able to get the benefit from it every single shot. However, combo building will be slow, as a single shot Vectis always shoots slower than a 2-shot Vectis. So how about instead we look at the vanilla version? If we choose to run the regular Vectis, the first thing you'll notice is that it only has 1 shot in the magazine naturally. This means you no longer need a ribbon that has minus magazine on it, and any type of Vectis ribbon will work. Another interesting thing is you can actually hit above 110 multi-shot on a crit chance multi-shot dual stat vanilla Vectis, which means you can even save a slot here. You won't have to crit damage roll, but this makes it viable and cheaper, letting you slot stuff in such as hammer shot or heavy caliber. This gives you a cheaper option than the god rolls. Additionally, vanilla Vectis builds combo off of base 1 instead of 5, meaning it'll be easier to get more damage out of Vectis at the start. Finally, let's look at the arcanes you could be running. Because it's a 1 meg Vectis and not 2, there's absolutely no reason to run acceleration. This means you can run stuff like Nullifier for more quality of life or even Energize. Alright, so let's go test out this vanilla Vectis. I'll show you how it's done. I'm just gonna spawn in these level 110 Drake Hermetic Bombards, cast my bus, proc fix swap, and shoot the thigh. As you can see, the combo is ramping up extremely quick on my Vectis, and that's because it's base 1 instead of 5 like I said on the Prime. The reload speed on my Riven also helps out a lot alongside Volt's speed. It honestly holds pretty well up against the Vectis Prime. Alright, so for our second sniper today, we'll be looking at Rubico Prime. Now, Rubico Prime is actually a pretty special case with a lot of complicated decisions, so this will take a bit. First, we'll take a look at the Rivens. A tri-stat Rubico cannot reach 150 critical chance in the arsenal because the disposition is just too low. Because of that, there isn't that much of a difference between point strike or critical damage if your Riven has critical chance on it, so just keep point strike to maintain that higher fire rate. Rivens overall are pretty overkill on the Rubico and makes it easy to one-shot, so you just want to preserve your fire rate for recoveries. Now, the picture gets a little bit more interesting if you exclude crit chance rolls or look at dual stats. For dual stats, you can now run a crit damage multi-shot neg. This roll is immune to the disposition nerf, as the multi-shot will never drop low enough to get it under 50%, which is a huge issue with tri-stats right now. With critical delay, you'll already be above 100% crit chance, so it doesn't really matter that you don't have it on the Riven. Critical chance and multi-shot as a dual stat can make it a permanent orange setup if you use critical delay, but this will only be on the non-first limb, so not first cherry limb and not water limb, so it has debatable utility as you're lacking critical damage, which means you may fail one taps on water limbs. Now let's take a look at Rivenless setups. If you're Rivenless, you want to keep Vile Acceleration on due to the fire rate penalty. On the other hand, you hit 100% crit chance or even above up to 109, unlike with Point Strike. Therefore, you now have an empty flex slot that you would normally have slot in Argon Scope with. You can now instead use Hammer Shot or Heavy Caliber rank 8. Rank 8 would be the maximum I recommend due to the accuracy penalty. Heavy Caliber does 8.1% more damage compared to Hammer Shot with the second zoom level, or 7.0% damage compared to Hammer Shot if you're only using the first zoom. This assumes you have Vigorous Swap in the equation. If you remove it, the benefit of Heavy Caliber is even larger, at 25.1% more damage than Hammer Shot on second zoom and 23.4% on first zoom. But really, on a Rivenless setup, you should always be using Vigorous Swap. Alternatively, you can run Prime Chamber if you really want to, but this is a pretty pricey Riven for Rivenless setup, as well as being unforgiving, using up a slot that does not help your later shots as well as having a penalized fire rate. Only drop Vile Acceleration on a Rivenless setup if you have both access to Arcane Acceleration and Haste modes. Otherwise, critical delay makes Rubico fire kinda slow. In that case, you can run a mix of heavy caliber plus hammer shot, prime chamber plus hammer shot, or heavy caliber plus prime chamber. I would not recommend this third variant, as prime chamber is extremely reliant on making your first shot count and landing all shots, which heavy caliber penalizes heavily as well as having a lower fire rate. Remember, the biggest purpose for critical delay Rubico is to guarantee crits for first Terry Limb and water while not needing a Riven. Because you're betting on that one shot, it's advised to have fire rate backup if you time the shot wrong. For Riven builds, this gives you the chance to skimp on double crit chance slotting, letting you skimp out on the Riven itself to go for maximal yellow crit damage. With critical delay, a crit damage multi-shot neg dual stat will push you above 100% CC and do enough damage on yellows to one-shot limbs consistency without Eclipse. You still will need to build up a decent amount of combo though. You can also go for an alternative god roll of crit damage multi-shot damage neg, as damage is always more guaranteed damage, whereas crit chance isn't, especially because you can no longer hit 200 CC for guaranteed oranges on tri-stat Rubicos due to the disposition nerf. Now this may come as a surprise to you, but the third sniper we're looking at today is actually the Vulkar Wraith, a weapon that's always had a couple of problems with critical chance. Well, guess what? This completely fixes it up. The only caveat? Well, you do need a god roll to get this to work. I don't even have 100% crit chance here, but remember, the Vulkar Wraith Ribbon that I have is literally the worst possible god roll you can have, with F grade multi-shot, C- crit chance, C crit damage, and minus reload speed. If you get A+ grades or higher, you're pretty much sitting right about at 100%. The difference is actually really big and makes a huge difference in those solo runs as well as casual 4-mans. You can see if I slot in point strike here, it dips all the way down to 88% instead of 95.4, so I'm nearly 3 times more likely to fail to crit on point strike instead of critical delay. You only need one shot and no combo, so that's why this works out well. So before we take this out for a ride, I'm just going to swap over to my Worm Prime first, as that's the one that actually has the 2 synth mods set up for it, as we'll be using that to reload the weapon instead. Now I'm going to spawn my 110 Drake Hermetic Bombards, cast my shield on my buffs, proc fig swap, and shoot the thigh. You can see the Prime Chamber really doing the work here, as I have no combo, I take one shot and they die, then I pull out my pistol for a second, swap back, and now I have a full magazine again. The build is still as strong as it always was, and if anything, I'd hazard to say it's even stronger now, as in those shots I never saw a single white in this entire showcase here. Some of them died to even just 2 bullets instead of 3. The final weapon we'll be taking a look at today is the Kuva Tonkor. Kuva Tonkor is another one of those unique weapons having only one shot in the meg, which means how fast you can shoot is almost entirely dictated by your reload speed. I picked up a 58% Toxin Tonkor so that I could just slot in rhyme rounds alone and create a viral setup. Critical delay is able to fully take advantage of this due to only one shot in the meg. You're able to push the weapon all the way up from 75 to 86.1%, removing nearly one half of the non-crits. This is extremely important as the weapon only shoots once before you have to reload, so you want every shot to count. I'm running terminal velocity, as this makes the shots travel further and also makes it easier to land headshots. This also makes it easier to land precision strike shots, which will significantly reduce your reload down to 0.6 seconds. Alternatively, you could run primed fast hands, but this will only cut it down to 1 second, albeit with no proc conditions. So let's spawn in our 150 heavy corrupted gunners here. You can see how fast I can shoot at their heads, and I'm basically getting crits everywhere. Every single shot kills the one I shot at. There we go, bam, bam. Let's try that one more time. And, well, you can't really control the explosion radius on this, so you do actually want to run prime sure-footed. I totally forgot about that, but you pretty much clean shop up with every single hit. You even get a nice amount of AoE going, which probably can proc viral on enemies that manage to survive, so you can clean up very quickly afterwards. Any trash mobs most likely won't survive the initial hit and splash radius. Well, that about rounds up part 2 on this series. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. I covered all I could for the snipers that I thought might actually have a difference with the critical delay mod. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 74% of you are not subscribed. Feel free to reconsider, as I'll be making sure to cover Tempest Story as soon as it drops. You don't want to miss out on any of my tips and tricks. That's it for this video. Thank you all for watching. See you all next time.